This week's meta report sees 9 decks in the total of top 8s this weekend through 48 reported decks in the metagame. Can a betrayed leader's market price finally actually show some love into the meta report? Or can a grandfather clock actually be the more dominant card? What about the Wizard's Apprentice truly coming back to form and showing its dominance within a metagame? All that and more today, along with a budget deck that was able to find its way into a top 8 of a 32-player event. Let's get into today's meta report. The top 8 decks for week 9 showcase a little bit of diversity. Probably to no one's real shock that Ruby Amethyst was able to dominate the metagame again. However, 22 decks this week does not add up to the more than half that we have been seeing recently of the remaining other 8 decks. Sapphire Steel showing some love from players all around the world globally after a successful run last weekend, finishing in second place of the largest online Lorcana tournament to date. It found its way all over in different events this week. However, I will say its most dominant performance was once again in another online Pixelborn event. Amethyst Steel showing up in nice colors again, remaining to its fashion that we had seen in early December. Amber Amethyst getting a couple wins, Emerald Steel following. Amber Steel falling well down below, only one flute deck and one other deck that I will be showcasing in this particular video. A couple Popsicle decks, one Amber Emerald, two Amber Emeralds, and of course, one Ruby Emerald budget deck. While Ruby Amethyst still remains king, the rest of the field has been shaping up quite differently with a nice diversity of decks and choices. Unfortunately, I believe Ruby Amethyst still captured the most wins on the weekend for reported wins. Yes, it was in the most top 8s as well, but it still actually captured the most wins. So while it's nice to see these other decks have a diversity amongst top 8 metagames, Ruby Amethyst is still king, and none of these decks are really able to get over the hump and really show that they can dominate the Ruby Amethyst metagame. Still on top, still winning events, but we do have some fun new decks to take a look at and highlight some cards that are definitely going up on the final month of Disney Lorcana's metagame in Chapter 2, Rise of Floodborn. Let's take a look at a $50 or less budget deck. Nicholas Sigwald played in the Pack Fundraiser Special, which was an online Pixelborn event featuring 32 players, and he took this Ruby Emerald budget deck all the way to the top 4. The only characters in this deck that have less than 2 lore are our Flynn Rider at 1 cost and our Minnie Mouse at 1 cost. Every other card in this deck has 2 lore or above, and most of the crucial elements to the deck are revolved around evasive. Last week, I had a video come out showcasing the different potential decks for beginners. This deck definitely comes out being a showcase of a version of the deck that I released last week with more top-end uninkable finishers utilizing Lady Tremaine and Genie as a ways for removal and bouncing, still capturing the Hypnotize, but also featuring 4 Dragonfire. The one card in this deck that honestly confuses me enough is Daisy Duck. I'm just not certain what that card is really doing in this particular deck, and I think we could definitely do better than it. But aside from that, it's a very, very straightforward beater lore deck, just gaining lore through questing and some subtle removal along the way with nice interactions and the effectiveness of what evasive can do for you in the metagame. And of course, the addition of Lucifer to really punish opponents that are likely not expecting the card to come down is a nice little addition feature to this particular budget list. I believe when I checked the deck itself, it came in at around $47, which is really impressive, seeing as Lady Tremaine is the most expensive card in the deck at $7 to $8 each, maybe even cheaper than that currently. And everything else in the deck likely falls below $1, with ironically Minnie Mouse Surfer potentially being the second most expensive card in this deck. Let's talk about Mufasa, the betrayed leader. Mufasa's ability of the sun will set. When this character is banished, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, you may play that character for free and they enter play exert it. Otherwise, put it on top of your deck. Is a card that has been mostly showcased within Amber Ruby decks. However, if you guys remember, and we go back to the top 8 decks of the week, there are 0 Amber Ruby decks in top 8 finishes that I could see or find this weekend across 48 decks. Therefore, Mufasa, who went up in price this week, nearly triple the amount, going from $8 to $24 or above, is finding his home in other decks. Now, this may have been the weekend to buy your Mufasas. So I do wonder if moving forward, we will find additional ways to showcase Mufasa in additional decks. This is a modified version of the deck that I took to a tournament this weekend, which was 17 players, and I finished in second place, losing to only the Ruby Amethyst player that won the event, going 4-0. This is a deck that I'm going to be talking about at length in another video, but I did want to showcase the fact that Mufasa's stock and price has gone up significantly, and other decks, along with a version of Amber Emerald, has come to the forefront as well for utilizing Mufasa outside of the traditional Ruby Amber decks. I hope you guys enjoy this deck, and I look forward to speaking about it in a later video, so of course hit subscribe if you want to hear more about this deck. Our good friend Zach Bibbins on Twitter was nice enough to consistently reveal his tournament report from the past weekend. Poor Zach drove 5 hours to play in this event. He was able to capture a top 8 finish. Sadly, his event did end as he lost to a Amber Steel flute deck, but nonetheless had to showcase the Steel Amethyst deck that Zach was playing and give some of the reports that he has. Zach believes this deck simply does not need Ursula, and you should never play less than 4 Elsa. You can also see in this particular deck list, there are no Smash. He believes you can get way more tempo out of utilizing your songs and exerting characters like Maleficent and Tinkerbell, and when necessary, Benjen. Benjen is also a crucial part of the deck. Being able to consistently remove opposing Fishborn Quills can truly make any difficult matchup a little more favorable. Being able to remove them against Popsicles and the more prevalent and more recently known Blue Steel Wheel decks has become a key factor in the matchup for the Amethyst Steel players. This is a deck that has continuously evolved over the weeks. It's very well positioned in the metagame currently, with Steel Flute falling off as it being a more difficult matchup for that to contend with. And the recent addition of Blue Fairy has come up in big ways as a nice and wonderful way to recover from board waves, along with being just a crucial draw card advantage throughout the game completely. Wanted to give a shout out to Adventure Games, which had a 1K this past weekend with 38 players. A player by the name of Caleb, or in our Discord known as Zazzle, reached out to us via email and then actually hit me up in DMs to tell me all about this wonderful store and the event that was held in Colorado. Wanted to give a shout out to them, and let's break down the top 4 Ruby Amethyst deck because it's a bit gruesome and grim, playing some different interesting cards, and we have the report to tell the tale. This deck was played by Blanky, and he named it Gruesomely Goated. That's right, this deck is representing the uninkable song Gruesome and Grim.
I find delight in the gruesome and grim. Oh, that's terrible. Thank you, my boy.
Aside from the addition of Gruesome and Grim and the potential addition of Dragonfire as 2 more uninkable cards for the deck, we had to make a true decision of how we were best going to utilize our uninkables in this particular lineup. There are no Elsas in this deck, and I think that's fine because you had to make room for cards like Gruesome and Grim, so replacing Elsa is great. Aside from that, there are really no other notable missing cards. He really does do a wonderful job with deciding the numbers on his deck. The 4 ofs are the 4 ofs, and everything else kind of fits into filling a role. No Maleficent Monstrous Dragon also opened up for more potential playable cards earlier on in the game to gain better tempo rather than relying on the 9-cost inkable. So let's break down the addition of Gruesome and Grim and why its potential in this deck is truly higher than what most would expect. In the deck, we have Maleficent, Merlin Crab, and Minnie Mouse at 3 costs that can very gladly sing Gruesome and Grim when necessary. But what can it do for you? Well, with 3 Merlin Crabs, Gruesome and Grim has the potential to give Gruesome and Grim has the potential to now add more and actually stronger Madam Mim foxes in your deck. Being able to exert a Maleficent or even exert a fox, if you would like, to sing Gruesome and Grim to play a Merlin Crab has the ability to now target Merlin Crab himself, making him a 6 strength character, allowing him to run into an opposing character, potentially being banished himself because of 3 willpower, and then giving another character plus 3 strength again to utilize for even bigger trades. I believe this is a way to truly turn the tide at a certain point in matchups. It also gives the potential to removing Ursula much easier in mirror matches. Along with that, of course, being able to just play Rabbit and draw a card immediately and utilize it for a rush if necessary, let it get banished, draw an additional card, all for 1 resource cheaper, or being able to be sung for free. Again, singing with a Maleficent or a Crab or a Minnie Mouse, allowing you to play Rabbit or play Goat, gain a lore, or draw a card, and then run into an opposing character, potentially for a trade, gaining an additional lore, or drawing an additional card, can actually all be done at the cost of just exerting one of your 3-cost characters, which enables you to still have plenty of resources within a turn to utilize for other means. It's definitely a card that, when first revealed, people weren't too high on, but everything explained by Blanky in our Discord really gives credit to the card, and it might be a reason for new players to really give it a go. I was very excited to see Gruesome and Grin in this particular list. He was able to take it to a top 4 split. And what I really, really enjoy about the idea is everything he said. He really makes it feel like this card has enough tempo to be worth the uninkable cost. And it's just something we have not seen much of at all within the metagame so far. So huge shout out to Blanky here for potentially finding a new tech card for Ruby Amethyst players to consider moving forward within the metagame. Shout out again to Adventure Games. I heard really great things about the event. All of the players that joined the Discord that talked about it talk very highly of the particular store. So a definite huge shout out to Adventure Games, and good luck with future events. SCGCON Hartford is the next stop for Star City Games, February 2nd through 4th, featuring 3 events, one on Friday, which will be a 1K, one on Saturday, which will be a 5K, and an additional 1K tournament on Sunday. That's right, we're just a few weeks away from SCGCon. I'll be there. Majority of the TFM crew will actually be there. We're very much excited to play in this weekend of events. Definitely looking forward to it. Of course, if you're heading to the event, let me know in the comments. If you're enjoying the content so far, definitely hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, we do this weekly, consistently covering the best decks and data from the weekend of the past. So hit subscribe for me. And of course, as always, definitely let me know what you're playing this week in your Lorcana events. Cogsworth Grandfather Clock. This was a card that was honestly very highly talked about from the spoiler season of Rise of the Floodborn. However, until recently, he simply could not find a home. Last weekend, we saw a 2nd place finish that might have finally put the shining light on the potential for this particular character. Since last weekend, it had a gigantic upsurge in top 8 finishes, finishing with 9, which is, yes, significantly less than Ruby Amethyst. However, it was significantly more than the next deck behind it with only 5. This deck 100% is centered around Cogsworth. Yes, it has a lot of very impressive cards, a lot of very powerful tools, but Cogsworth being a shift 3, which isn't even utilized, may I add, However, the ability of Ward and Unwind on a 2 lore character with 5 willpower is the key factor for this deck. Being able to comfortably play Cogsworth on a board that likely has another character hanging around, such as a Mickey Mouse Detective or a Prince Eric, even maybe, is just full blown protected from any forms of removal that could even interact with Cogsworth, allowing you to basically guarantee a grab your swords or a whole new world as early as turn 5 in any game that you're able to play Mickey Mouse on 3, or the more fortunate play of playing Fishborn Quill on 3. Anytime you can do that, you can safely play Cogsworth on 4, have it be protected, have your opponent simply not being able to interact with it, and giving yourself the most potential of choice and decisions with your 5-cost songs. Again, a whole new world and grab your swords are ideal, but let it go is also always an option. The ability of adding resist 1 to all of your other characters is just another line of defense for your deck. This deck also features Aurora, which gives every one of your other characters ward, which is another notable annoying thing for opponents to deal with. Having resist 1 and ward on all opposing characters definitely puts yourself in a position to have a true wall against majority of decks within the metagame. Nothing to Hide is another card in this deck that continuously has shown up. It has been proven now over several weeks that players truly enjoy the ability to Nothing to Hide either early in the game to know exactly their lines for inking, or to know exactly when is the perfect and prime time to sing A Whole New World. This particular list showcases the addition of Tomateo. I do think in this list, having only 8 items isn't necessarily the best option for Tomateo. However, this deck does suffer from being able to finish out games. It's very good at dragging along and grinding through them and creating problems for your opponent. However, having that core key way to finish games outside of Bell Strange but not special has been proving difficult, and I think it's the true weak spot of this deck. While I do believe this deck is more consistent than the traditional popsicle decks that we had seen early in the metagame, I do think it does suffer from kind of the same problems of having a very difficult time winning the game in a quick fashion. The last thing I want to say about this deck is the mirror match. Honestly, I watched several mirror matches this weekend at the event that I attended, and they looked miserable. I mean that in the best, most pleasant way. But in all honesty, I think it might have been worse than Ruby Amethyst mirror matches of Chapter 1. This deck just is a grind on grind in the mirror, and it takes a lot of effort to win the mirror match, especially when your opponent just knows that the really only problematic card that must be answered is Bellastrains but not Special. So holding on to your let it goes just for that card in specific, or knowing that you need to be able to A Whole New World away your opponent's strange but not specials, it is kind of where I think the mirror match lies, because it's the one card that has the ability to just actually force your opponents to finally turn sideways and gain lore. For the most part, once you get double Cogsworth in play, so many of the cards in the decks and even the characters within the decks being able to challenge one another just don't do any damage. And therefore, there's a lot of stalemate created in the metagame for this particular mirror match. What I will say for sure, that if you're planning on playing this deck, you should now know that it's a popular deck within the metagame, and you need to start planning for the mirror match. My biggest suggestion is the addition of Hercules. I do believe his 6 strength and his resist 2 fits very well into this deck, and I think it can definitely create trades for you that just simply do not exist right now in this particular list. I would definitely suggest that. It's also another deck that I'm going to be talking about in a video later on this week. So if you want to hear more about my thoughts on this deck, definitely subscribe to the channel, because there's another video coming out this week giving a lot of limelight to this particular list. Let's get into the next deck. Emerald Steel finds its way into another few top 8s this weekend, but I really wanted to showcase this particular list because I think this is a prime example of what the deck may need to do to be truly successful. For me, Prince John is the entire Emerald Steel deck. I believe games that you're able to successfully cast and play Prince John on turn 3, you have a much higher win rate than games that you do not or are incapable of playing the card. So the addition of this deck playing Zimba Future King and Cinderella has more ways to draw and discard to fine tune your hand will go such a long way in creating the consistency that this deck needs to really get ahead of your opponent. If you're able to play a Zimba on turn 1, find the card that you need, and then correctly be able to play Bucky into Prince John, that's great. However, if you do not have Prince John in your hand, Bucky really isn't as good. Better off trying to play Cinderella to get one more opportunity at drawing Prince John before the inevitable turn 3 where you need to play him. Being able to add 2 more draws into the deck after a hard mulligan really should shear up some inconsistencies within the deck, and I think that there's a good chance that it did. Everything about this deck, aside from that, is a very straightforward list. This is just the first time that I have really seen Zimba and Cinderella seeing use. I personally play Zimba and Cinderella in my flute decks because I think it's that important to find your flutes early to get ahead of your opponent in the game. Also, to round out your random uninkable turns. I think decks like this require you to see certain hands early, and adding the additional draw power from these cards really goes a long way. And I'm very excited to see this type of deck being successful within the metagame. Arthur's Wizard Apprentice. The 3-cost, uninkable, 1 strength, 3 willpower, 1 lore card with the ability of Student. Whenever this character requests, you may return another chosen character of yours to your hand to gain 2 lore. Has effectively been coming back more and more. Last weekend, we saw Lorcana Goons finish in 10th place of the 282-player online Pixel Blur event hosted by Thea. This week, we see an Aggro Arthur deck win the Pack Fundraiser Special, featuring Arthur as the mainstay here, even going to the extent of playing a card like Fan the Flames to protect it even further. This deck is a truly aggressive version of the Ruby Amethyst landscape. I said last weekend that I actually do believe Arthur might be the better card in majority of mirror matches. Right now, Ruby Amethyst doesn't have an effective way to deal with an untapped character with 3 willpower. It doesn't have a great way to do it. Now, there are particular cards in the metagame that we could fall back to play to be able to punish opposing Minnie Mouses and opposing Arthurs. But right now, with a deck that's featured of LeFou and ironically featuring Arthur to return cards in her hand, and even to the extent of Fan the Flames, maybe even there's a world where Ratigan can find some love here. No, but seriously, this deck is very good into the metagame. It especially decks that aren't going to play Smash, which is we have been seeing now Steel decks saying, hey, I'm going to just ignore or find other means to eventually get rid of the Minnie Mouse or other things like that. I think that's a perfect opportunity for Arthur to be one of the more dominant characters within the metagame. At PAX Unplugged, we had seen a ton of Arthurs. One of the more played characters in the event, finished in the finals, top 4s, top 8s, all over it. Since then, it kind of fell off for a few weeks because I think there was a very good adaptation to it. Ruby Amethyst went more control to kind of get removed some of those things and still remain dominant. But now that Ruby Amethyst has the ability to have a full-blown control deck, temple mid-range deck, and now this version, which is a complete aggro deck, is really creating the rock, paper, scissors amongst itself, which is a scary thing to really believe, but that's kind of what's going on. But this deck also has game into everything else. The Amber Steel decks that are very focused on flutes, this deck races flute very, very well. It forces them to have all the removal in the world to consistently remove these things. They're not saying that the deck can't, but it's really forcing them. When you see Amethyst Steel decks not playing Smash, this also punishes that. When you see the Sapphire Steel decks potentially not playing Smash. I think that's less likely. I've seen more Smashes in those decks than other decks, but it's still another sign that, hey, 3 health is good, and 3 health that's untapped is better. And that's definitely what's going on in this deck. So a huge shout out to this player for winning this event and really showcasing that a card like Fan the Flames can be relevant in this particular metagame. Really exciting meta this week. Lots of different decks to look at, lots of new cards to break down. Seeing the grandfather clock, seeing Mufasa, seeing Arthur really come back to the forefront, or truly just showcasing itself in the forefront for the very first time is a very interesting fact. I do think there are many cards this week that got better, and it really is creating a wider spread metagame for more and more players to kind of prepare for. Right now, it is a surefire thing that you should be preparing. You should be preparing for Ruby Amethyst matchups. But other than that, you've had such up and down swings. One week it's Amethyst Steel, another week it's Ruby Amber, another week it's Sapphire Steel. The second and third best decks in the game are showing to be truly undefined, which is likely going to cause your choices within deck building even more difficult moving forward as the weeks to come. All in all, we're going to be focusing on this at length moving up on the channel because we are attending Hartford, which we believe is going to be a really big event, being a 5K event on the East Coast. Lots of people I know are driving to it and playing in it. It very well could end up being a 150 plus player event if all goes well. So it'll definitely be a feature, of course, as always on this week. We have many great decks to discuss. I'm so grateful for everyone that reached out to me this week, and a real special shout out to the Encounter Comics and Games. When I walked into the event, the tournament organizer walked up to me, shook my hand, he said, "Thanks for coming." And then before the event started, he actually said, "Hey, this is Dan from the Forbidden Mountain. He has a great channel." It was really nice, humbling words. And then of course, he put a bounty on my head. That's right. All of a sudden, now I was the bounty of the event, and if any player that was able to beat me won an additional 2 packs from the tournament. Huge shout out to Colin that did take me down in a wonderful 3-game set that we played that came down to the absolute wire. I really had fun at the event, and a huge shout out to Encounter. They've been trying very hard to really start a scene in the Lehigh Valley area of Pennsylvania. I'm looking forward to seeing more and more from them and going to more and more of their events. Again, as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you're looking for more videos like this, you can definitely check out a video here, check out a video there. We're all about the metagame and covering it. And of course, more recently, we're covering every weekly event of the cards release. So much to be tracked from this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that like button. If you're brand new, hit subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video.